series of documentation of voyage and exploration into the art realms. And this series will explore the artistic ventures of this particular human as he submerges himself into the deep recesses of the mind and the psyche to provide a layered comprehension of this species through one connecting language format that has proven to express itself better than human words as the very first generations. But welcome to the interactive antisocial man. That's kind of a paradox, and that makes no sense. I get the feeling that this is your way of messing with me. I'll give you interactive, you antisocial man, with my fist down your throat, and we'll see if you still like to mess with.
Hello and welcome to another one of these things that I guess are called videos on YouTube. I don't know. I never know how to start these things. On a more real side note, I'm sorry for not being able to get back into one of these whatevers. These past 2 months have been pretty busy. I've gotten myself into a lot more projects outside of just art, so it has been kind of difficult for me to do one of these videos. But yeah, I've finally found some time, and I'll be doing a part 2 to the last video of the commission piece. This time I'm going to do a bit of digital kind of work, and also I ended up making a GIF, whatever you want to call it. I really don't care. So yeah, let's just get right into it. For this one, I'm just going to go over how I went about it, and it'll be more of the process of how I go about making the effects that I typically use and tips and tricks on Photoshop and also on Premiere Pro, which is how I do some of the glitchy and kind of VHS effects for those who are kind of interested. I have my own way of doing it. It changes and it varies just because I keep learning how to do new things, different things, and so this one kind of showcases some of the new stuff that I've learned and some of the stuff that I implemented for this specific GIF, whatever. So starting off with how I went about the digital kind of version of the drawing, you can see that I took a picture of the original drawing, which was made with ink, and then from there I just changed the levels so that you can only see more of a black and white contrast, which you can do by simply messing around with the drop down image tab, whatever you want to call it, and in adjustments you can mess with the levels and the contrast until you get that nice happy medium that you're looking for, black and white. From there I used a masking, and that is how I got rid of the white. This is not a tutorial, so I won't go into detail as to how to do all these things. You can find tutorials on YouTube that will probably do a much better job of explaining these things, but this is more of a shortened version of my process of making this rather than a tutorial. And then from there I just did a layer underneath the drawing, and I basically painted it until I got something that was to my liking. After that, I then went about working on a background, which I wanted to make it a bit more psychedelic, and for that it took a while because I was trying to figure out what colors would work well, and I ended up choosing these kind of final colors where I did a solid background of a specific color, and then I added this kind of textured layer to give it that kind of psychedelic look and feel to it, and that was done with a brush that I got years ago. I don't remember how I found it, I just know that I did, and it's useful for this, and you can see me using it in a sample kind of way, but I'm sure if you Google for something like this you can easily find it. If I find it, I'll probably leave it in the description below. Yeah, and then I just messed around with different colors until I got something I liked. I changed some of the blending options, gave it some kind of gradient so that it makes it look a little bit different and more fun to look at. But if you look at it long enough, it'll probably hurt your eyes, which is great because that's exactly what I want to do, is hurt people's eyes with my art. Mission accomplished. I hope. I don't know. Let's just move on. And then the last thing I do is I add some kind of grain effects so that I can give it some kind of texture. And the way I do that is I just set a white layer, and then you go to the filter drop down menu, you click on the filter gallery, and you choose the grain option that is located in the texture, and you can mess around with those settings, different resolutions of your piece or whatever it is that you're working on. You'll probably have to mess with it more so that you can either get less or more. It'll just depend. And then from there, you just choose a different blending mode, and you can mess around with the opacity if you want. Alright, we move on to the next step. This one I'll try to keep it brief, but it's just basically me messing around with different colors and making different effects by adding different layers and adding different colors. Particularly, I just wanted to make a blue and green layer simply to add the effect of it kind of warping. Mostly I was using it more so for a sort of VHS effect of it just sort of having that saturation kind of effect of it just, the colors just bleeding from one side to the other, which you can also do on your video editing program, but I decided to do it here just because I wanted to mess around with some of the colors. I wanted to specifically get some effects, and I thought that this would be the best way to mess around with that. I'll show you what I do with these different layers, but here you can kind of see the process of basically experimenting until I got something that I liked and that looked pleasing to me in one way or another. And here I show one way in which I do that by simply adding a new layer, a color, and merging it down with a copy of the background, and then just messing around with the blending options until I get something that I like, that I find quite pleasing, and then just kind of merge them together to create that kind of effect. And that's kind of how I go about making these different types of layers. Sort of the last thing that I did was because I ended up just making a blue and a green one simply because there was already too much red. I figured that the contrast would be best if I focused on the blue and green colors instead. Otherwise I would have done blue and red. But anyways, that's another topic. I'm just speaking from a technical and artistic standpoint. That may not make any sense. It only makes sense in my head. But anyways, from making the blue and the green, I kind of offsetted them a bit off to the opposite sides. That way you can get that sort of double vision, and here you can kind of see how I went about doing that in this example of these two particular layers. And now we head into the fun stuff, which is setting them in a order in which you create an animation so that it gives it that effect like if it is warping in and out and really distorting the coloration as VHS would, or an old TV would. Well, actually not the TV, but the VCR. Anyways, doesn't matter. This is where I did that. I basically got all the different layers that I got that I liked the sort of different distorted colors in them after messing with the different blending options, and I ended up making a bit of an animation out of that, which you can see here in this screen. I then rendered this into a video, and then I exported it, or rather imported it, into Premiere Pro. And I'll do my best to explain what I did in Premiere Pro, because there is a lot that I have messed around with the effects so that I can get the proper look and aesthetic that I'm trying to go for. I actually made a preset that works to my liking, and the way I did it was I basically learned from seeing other people doing this very same thing on YouTube. There's people out there that do a better job at teaching you how to do this effect. I just basically took all that stuff that I learned from them and I applied it in my own way, made my own version of it, and it's more to my liking and it's more suitable to the way that I perceive this effect to be like. I don't claim it to be the best, I just, in my opinion, it's what I prefer to see. If you're interested in these effects, I don't know, I might have them available for people to download and use, I don't know. Anyways, what I ended up doing was I had two videos that I made, and they are in two different sizes. There's one that is more of a square shape, and then there's one where it's the long size, which is the original size of the drawing. I ended up using the size of the square. Yeah, I know that the size of a VHS or a TV isn't an exact square, but it's just for the sake of being able to post it on the youth social meds so that it's easier for their consumption, whatever that means. And yeah, I ended up going with this, and it works, it's not bad, but I wanted to use the long size, that way I can kind of warp it up and down, which I do by setting a toggle animation in the motion tab where the position is at, and I move it up and down accordingly. And here you can kind of see how I did that. The next thing I'll be going over is some of the effects that I added, and you will notice that the most commonly used effects for this is wave warp, noise, and channel blur. You will also notice that I have 5 video tracks where I set up different layers of effects. Now I won't go too much into detail as to exactly how I did everything. That would take way too long and make this video way more boring than it already is. So instead I'll just give a general overview, and you can see the actual setting setups that I have set for each of these different video tracks. And feel free to pause anywhere in between and you can see what kind of effects I used, and you can try and implement it real time, I guess. I don't know. Also, like I've said already, resolution changes everything, so these effects may not necessarily work to the specific resolution that you have. You'll have to tweak it till you find that happy medium that gets it close to what you're looking for. But to speak in general terms, the bottom layer, I basically just focused on adding some wave warp and also some noise to give it that nice grain and to give it that kind of VHS effect of it warping within lines of sorts, in and out. Usually in this step I will add some channel blur, which will give it that kind of coloration bleeding into the image in and out with that bluish and that greenish or reddish. It just depends on what it calls for. But for this one, because I had already done a bit of that in Photoshop, I didn't add it to this one. I made a separate layer for that so that I can add a subtle effect of that kind of color bleeding into itself or out of itself. I don't know, whatever. So after adding those beautiful effects onto your video, then you have something that looks a little bit more closely resembling a VHS tape of sorts. But we're just getting started. The next thing I do is I have a separate video track containing the same video, but we just have the parts that we want to really warp into something more distorted. And here I have a different set of warp effects that will really give you that nice distortion that really just warps the whole video where you can't really tell what's going on. And I'm pretty sure you can use either one of the square or sine or triangle or unicircle effect options to get this kind of effect. I chose to use the unicircle to give it that bit of an evenness. Then on top of that layer I added some words, adding a title from the drop down menu, adding a new title, and I used a VCR kind of font that I downloaded online. I'm sure you can find that by just looking for it. And then I added the similar effects. You can pause and look at the effects that I used for those, basically adding some channel blur and also some wave warp so that it can kind of mimic the effect from the foreground. Also had to add some separate segments so that I can add the similar effect of the complete distortion for the title clips. I really don't know what to call them, but I think you get the point. Lastly, I just got some VHS stock footage and then I just overlaid it on top, changed some of the blending options and opacity, and voila, you have the final product. Oh, one more lastly. I just imported it back to Photoshop and then I just saved it as a GIF by simply going to File and then Save for Web, set it to loop forever, and yeah, I don't know, I don't think I should need to tell you how to save a GIF, whatever. You can find people who can teach all this stuff better to you on YouTube, on the YouTube YouTube watcher. I don't know. I'm too tired and I'm getting hungry and loopy. I need to eat something. Alright, that was enough of that. Let's just get to the final result so that we can see what beauteous, disastrous thing we created. I think that pretty much covers it, or something. Anyways, until next time, it has been fun. Yeah. I'll probably leave some stuff in the description below for those who are interested. Let's see if I can find some of this stuff. I don't know. I still, to this point that I'm recording this audio, I don't know if I have found the stuff that I used, or I don't know, whatever. I'm just gonna shut up. So goodbye. Till next time.